Diggs Nation.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Peanut Butter Magic. Today, we are going to talk about recording, all things studio, field, ADR, live. You record it, we discussing it.
It's the Peanut Butter Magic Show. It's the Peanut Butter Magic Show.
All right, welcome back to Peanut Butter Magic. I'm your co-host tonight, Brandon Austin. I got with me my man, Sway Low.
Yeah.
What's going on, Diggs? How you doing?
Everything's good, man. How are you?
Man, everything is great. Everything is wonderful. Getting ready for Christmas. Got the tree up.
Yep. We did ours last night, too.
Oh, man. I'm just waiting on Santa now.
Yeah. What you asking for? You been a good boy?
I've not been a good boy, but, you know, I asked him to bring me at least name brand coal this year. Like, I don't want... I'm getting tired of that store brand shit.
You do not want the great value, do you?
Dude, he don't even go to Great Value. He just goes and finds people's bonfires and just puts it in his bag.
He just got coal on the box. That's all.
That's right. It's like used Kroger bags with holes in them. Like, come on, man. At least bring me some Kinford or something.
Man, I got young kids, man, so I ain't got no gifts in so long. I forgot what gifts are. Let me tell you. They ain't got no money.
Need to get out and get some jobs, man.
My oldest daughter, she ain't really keen on doing much of anything. She don't have a driver's license. You know what I mean? Ain't really trying to find a job. However, she has been interning at, you know, the craft, a crafting business. She's been doing that, just kind of learning that as far as that's concerned. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Her learning how to make t-shirts and cups and mouse pads and stuff like that. So she does that on the week. Matter of fact, she's doing that right now, as a matter of fact. So I'll take it. She's staying busy, and her grades are good in school, so I ain't mad at her.
Yeah. You gotta start somewhere, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, speaking of crafts,
all right.
Today we are going to talk about microphones.
All right.
And how crafty they are.
Okay.
Now, I got my introduction into recording with Evolution.
Right.
The first actual studio that I went into was yours, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been kind of obsessed with studios ever since. I don't get into the music side of things, but when I was at MTSU, our video program was in the same building as the recording studio. And so I spent a lot of time in other people's sessions, just meeting them and finding out that they're going into the studio, and I would just go hang out. And I never got into the vocal side of things, but just the electronics behind it, the tech, the design, the soundproofing, like all that stuff's always just kind of fascinated me. So I thought today'd be a good time to just kind of discuss what it takes. I know to be a musician, you can't afford to go to the studio. Your best bet is to build something at home. A lot of the guys and gals that we work with, they have studios at home. You've got a studio at home. So I thought we could just kind of, discuss what it takes and some of the benefits to paying that extra dollar versus saving some money and doing it yourself. You know how we do.
No doubt. Okay. That's a great topic. I've had a studio now going on 23 years. I got my first setup around 2000, and I started investing in studio equipment because at the time I was recording in the Bronx, and my producer was buying a house. He was buying a house in Mount Vernon, and he bought the house, and then he wanted to put the studio in the basement of his house. But he was building it by himself. I mean, I was helping him, and he had a regular job and stuff like that. So it was taking a very long time for him to build the studio, and he kept making excuses. I gotta build this and I gotta do that and I gotta and then I still gotta work and this, that, and other. Now, I moved to New York to work with this guy. And it's taken like 6, 8, 10 months for him to build the studio. And me being a loyalist, I'm waiting on him, to kind of get this done. And the whole time I'm like, yo, I didn't come here to wait on somebody to get their shit together. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, and the more excuses that I was getting, and with all due respect, he's still one of my best friends. Big shout out. But he kept making all these excuses, and time is going by. I don't have any new records and stuff like that. And then I met this other guy that lived in Port Chester, New York. He had a studio, and I was going up to that studio, but it was also like a commercial spot. So I'm not the only one that's recording there. And he's got sessions that's coming, people paying. And he also had a rehearsal studio in the building as well. So the way his studio was designed was one side was rehearsal, the other side was recording, but the soundproofing wasn't that great. So if there was someone in there rehearsing, we couldn't make records because the sound would bleed over into our sessions. And the rehearsals were really like the bread and butter of the studio, to where he couldn't turn down rehearsal sessions for studio sessions because the studio sessions weren't as frequent as the rehearsal sessions. So here I am, I'm stuck, and I'm just thinking to myself, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And I didn't even own a computer at the time. Well, my aunt bought a new computer, and she was like, I have this old computer. You can have it. She was like, but the hard drive is dead on it. And she was like, but you can probably get a new hard drive on it. So I was like, all right, bring it over. And I opened up the computer, and the hard drive had a physical hole in it. Yeah, like you can see through the hole. Like, yeah. I'm like, what the hell? So it was a Dell computer. So I called Dell.
I don't think they ship them with holes in them.
Nah. No. I'm still trying to figure out how the hell the hard drive had a hole in it. You know what I mean?
They try to save weight. Like, I just cut some of the hard drive out.
So I called Dell, and I explained to them what's happening. They look up the serial number on the computer. Found out the computer was still under warranty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they came to my house, brought a brand new hard drive, installed it in my house. Bada bing, first piece of studio equipment.
How'd that conversation go? Yes, thank you for calling Dell. Yeah, my hard drive got a hole in it.
They're like, quit playing on my phone.
They didn't ask any questions. They were just like, we'll bring you another one.
No, they didn't. They didn't ask me any questions. And they brought me a new hard drive. And believe it or not, boss, the hard drive was only 10 gigabytes. That's how long ago this shit was.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but I'm like, okay, I have a computer. I might be able to start my own studio. So my friend Dennis, back there we were bootlegging software like a motherfucker. You know what I mean? So, you get this bootleg software, and he had a disk with all kinds of Waves plugins, and he had Logic, and he gave me the disk. I installed the software, and everything was working. Now, I had a cheap mic, didn't have a mic stand, didn't have any monitors, like a regular pair of headphones. So I found some old car stereo speakers, and I connected those and used those as studio monitors. And I had a broomstick, was my first mic stand. And it's just kind of grown into what it is now from that, And that's why I tell people there's no excuse. Very humble beginnings for me as far as equipment is concerned. I started with that, and how bad do you want it?
Right.
At the end of the day, you know what I mean, as far as that's concerned. So But it's grown over time. Now my setup is very it's phenomenal for me, and I'm very proud of the accomplishments that I have with my setup as far as that's concerned. But it was a matter of necessity,
Hmm.
just needing to be creative, and all the resources that I had at the time were dried up. You know,
Do you still have any of the music that you recorded on that old setup?
I do. It's probably on a disc somewhere. Um, I put out a lot of records. Like, I did Sex Lies and Hip Hop Music. I did the first half of that album on that
Oh,
setup. You know what I
okay.
mean? I did that, and then I upgraded.
Hmm.
Like soon after I moved to Tennessee, I upgraded and started just kind of um, buying things here and there to better my sound and get better at what I was doing as far as that's concerned. But yeah, I got some music somewhere around here. Um, it didn't sound very great. Quality was very poor. I didn't know what I was doing as far as getting sound in and out. My thing was if I can just get sound in and out, I'm good.
Hmm.
I'm good. And I've always been about that culture of I really don't care how it sounds. If I got a complete record, I don't put that bitch out.
Right.
You know what I mean? As far as that's concerned. So um
You did the work. Let the world hear it.
absolutely. Absolutely. And if it sounds shitty, okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? Hopefully you can get the message in between all the crap that you're hearing and stuff like that. So yeah. Yeah, I still got some music from that.
Do you think that owning and operating a studio helps your songwriting ability and the talent and exercise of laying down vocal tracks? Do you think that also operating the software helps you in that regard?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. One, it's cheaper, you know.
Right.
You can experiment. Um, you don't because and going back to the days of when we were in the band, we're going to the studio and we're paying to be there. So a lot of times you got to kind of know what you want to do going in prior to going in because time is money and you're paying by the hour.
Hmm.
Whereas having your own, you cannot know where you're gonna go initially and find your way as you go because you've already done the heavy lifting as far as cost is concerned. You have the equipment. So at that point, it's just a matter of time and
That's true.
figuring it out. Yeah. So, um, but at the same time, the cons I would say would be a lot of times I'm doing a lot of recordings alone. So there's nobody to really just bounce ideas off of, get feedback from until you have like a finished product. So that can be a little challenging for you simply because you know, having input can be very helpful in this process.
Well, and that was one of the things I wanted to talk about was the different positions that people take inside the studio.
Mhm.
Like I was listening to a podcast the other day with Rick Rubin,
Mhm.
and he was talking about working with a band, and they would go into the studio for weeks at a time and just kind of come up with the sound and write the lyrics, and then he would help turn it into the songs that we heard on the radio. That's what made him famous because he has his
Mhm.
own style, right? Like if you're doing it by yourself and you don't have those other people like the engineers and the producers, there's a lot of hats that you're having to fill. Does that, and I would assume it does, but over time maybe get better. Does that hinder that recording process, right? Because you've got so many things that you're having to keep on your brain all at once, and then being creative on top of that has just got to be tiresome.
Definitely. Definitely. But I go back to a conversation that you and I had a few years ago, to where we were putting together my son's project.
Hmm.
And I remember um, we were down to the visual parts of it where we were doing the music video. And I remember you calling me and you were like, you know, it's a lot of work. I'm getting overwhelmed. My brain is here, there, here, there, here, there. And I remember saying to you, you're trying to eat a cow. You know, it's like you're taking 2 slices of bread, putting one slice on the back of the cow, the other slice on the front of the cow, and you're trying to bite into it. And I was
How else
like,
do you eat a cow?
you break it down and make sandwiches out of that shit.
Right.
I was like, don't eat the cow, eat some hamburgers.
There you go.
You know what I mean? So just break it down. Because I think we had shot 3 music videos and you were trying to edit them all at the same time.
I don't always make wise choices.
And you were like, man, I'm so confused right now. And I'm so overwhelmed. And I'm like, yo, stop trying to eat the fucking cow, man.
Right. That's true.
But you got it immediately when I said, you're like, oh, okay. And then everything started to flow smooth after that and whatnot.
Right.
So yeah, I have to wear a lot of hats, but I also, I do my best to not put the cart before the horse. If production is what I'm doing, then that's what I'm doing. You know, I don't produce and then be like, oh, that sounds good. Let me try to lay a vocal here. No, I'll produce first. Or if I'm writing, I'll write first and whatnot. And I may tickle the ivories and stuff as I'm writing just to get melodies and harmonies and stuff like that. But whatever process I'm in at the moment, that's what I stick to until it's time to move to the next phase. And I think that's the way that I prevent from getting overwhelmed. Just step by step.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. So, like mentioning this interview that I listened to with Rick Rubin and him talking about working with the band, how does an artist, I guess the song just becomes more natural, because how does an artist have that other ear in the room? You know, like I know you've talked about working with producers in New York before. When you're working on a song, you don't have that other person to go, hey, why don't you try it this way? Or hey, why don't you try it that way? You just record it as you have heard it in your head, right?
Right.
So do you, when you work with these artists that are in another state, producers, do you, or maybe you just have friends, do you play the songs and go, hey, check this out, what do you think, give me some feedback? Or does it just, this is how I recorded it, this is the song that they're going to hear?
I think it could be a combination of both. I have like three musical influences that I really respect in my life. And as I'm making records, they're always in the back of my mind. I'm always thinking that, is this something that he's gonna appreciate? You know what I mean? Am I making a record that if I play it for this guy, he's gonna be like, that shit's fire. You know what I mean? So even though I'm not talking to them as I'm producing the records, their impact on my musical life was so great to where I just always want to be pleasing to them, even though they're not necessarily in the session with me. It's kind of like a what would Jesus do type of deal. You know what I'm saying? What would my mans do? If I played this, what is going to be his response? Am I going to blow him out the water? Or is he going to be like, man, you got to go back to the drawing board? So there's always that thing in the back of my mind to where I want to please these guys because they're good at what they do, you know? And if I can present something to them that they'll appreciate, in my mind, I think, you know, the rest of society would at least appreciate it, at least a little bit, you know.
What advice would you give for like a musician who's just at home and has written some songs and has invested into some basic gear and they're recording, they don't have that relationship that you're talking about where you can kind of think about how these people that you work closely with would react before you even let them play it. They're just doing all of this on their own. How do you step out of what you have done and listen to it from a new perspective to try to see what changes or improvements you could make.
I'm not sure that you can. You have to get input from others to know that you're at least going in the right direction. The problem that I see with that is that a lot of times people won't be genuinely honest with you.
Yeah.
You know, they'll tell you, "Oh, that shit's fire." You know what I mean? Or, "That's dope," or whatever the case, just to placate you.
Hmm.
That's why I think it's important to kind of have those people in your corner, so that won't sugarcoat anything. That will tell you, you know, you're flat here, or you're off there, or the snare don't hit right here, or you should use a different synth here and make that happen. Because you know, other people, they don't care if you sink or swim.
Right.
But if you got somebody that genuinely wants to see you win, and they don't necessarily have to be a musician. A lot of times I hear artists, they'll play a record for somebody and they may not be a musician, and they'll be like, you know, it's okay. And they get in their feelings and be like, he ain't even a musician. He don't know what he's talking about. Yeah, but he can hear the music.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that doesn't mean he deaf just because he ain't never made a record, you know. So just,
That's your audience.
yeah, you know what I mean? And I learned at a very young age that everybody's a critic. So just because people are critical of your stuff doesn't necessarily mean they're haters or they hate you or anything like that. Everybody has an opinion, and they don't have to necessarily be knowledgeable in the craft that you're knowledgeable in to know what sounds good, what looks good, what feels good, and what don't.
Right.
You know, get with your wife, and she may hate your music, but she may also hear something in the music that could enhance the music that she hates that you produce.
Right.
You know, doesn't mean that she hates you or she don't want to see you win. She may be telling you that so you can win. And artists are sensitive people. We're egotistical. You know, we may cry on you if you tell us you don't like our shit. You know, but get out of your feelings. Get out of your feelings and take the criticism and get better.
Yeah.
You know, just like when you got started with filming, you were not nice. You know what I mean? And
What? I'm a run before I walk kind of guy.
you a fly before you crawl type of dude.
You got that right. Right off the cliff. That's where
Absolutely.
I'm going.
But you had I won't say you weren't nice. I'll say you had a lot of learning to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep.
But you know, you got better, and you wanted to get better, and it takes a lot of that too, wanting to be better.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're complacent with what you're doing, there's no room for growth. You know, but even in those times, I never said to you, "You suck" or "Your shit's awful" or whatever the case may be. If anything, I wanted to give you words of encouragement so you would keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're too critical on people, people are sensitive. And they be like, well, forget it. This ain't for me. I'm not going to do it.
Right.
You know? But I know you had passion before you even had a camera. So the last thing I wanted to do was discourage you. You know, even though there was still a whole lot of work to do. You know, I still wanted you to be the best that you could be. You know, so I wasn't gonna. The last thing I was gonna do is tell you, Brandon, man, this shit is garbage. I was not gonna do that to you and whatnot, because for one, I needed a video guy.
Right. I remember I had a guy in one of my film classes. He was in my group. The teacher divided us up, and there was like 3 or 4 people in a group. And I think we had 3, and one of the guys quit like right away. Every semester, no matter what class you were in, there's always people that drop out.
Mhm.
And so it was down to the two of us. And this instructor liked to use the term hot garbage.
Yeah.
And we would turn something in and he'd play it for the whole class. And then he'd be like, this is hot garbage. And I'm going to tell you why. And he left, but that was my favorite professor, one of my favorite professors of all classes, because he was completely honest with you. And I
Yeah.
remember turning stuff in and I'm like, man, this is the best thing that I've made in this class. And he would find everything wrong with it and point it out frame by frame.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the guy that was in my group with me. It was just the two of us left, and he directed one of the videos, and we turned it in and said, "Here we go." And he did the same thing. This is hot garbage, and I'm gonna tell you why. And he got the same rant that I got the week before. He never showed up for class after that.
Did you ever run into that kid after that? You ever
I
see
did
him
not.
again?
I did not.
Really?
Never saw him again.
He dropped the class and everything?
I don't know what other classes he was in. That was the only one that we had together.
Uh-huh.
But he was done. Like the instructor, basically what you just said, the instructor told him that he wasn't good and that he didn't have an eye for it, whatever his breakdown was. And that kid, it hurt his feelings and he left and he was out of the program. Never saw him again. But someone like me, like if you tell me I suck and I don't think I suck, then I'm going to try to not suck the next time.
Right.
And so I kept coming back. And for the remainder of the semester, it was just me against other groups of 3. So
That's why you're as good as you are today.
I try. But yeah, I had to start wearing all the hats right away. But it also made me not a good team player because I'm used to wearing all the hats. And then now that you have that hat on, take it off. I don't like what you're doing.
Right. It can be difficult. You're right. It can be difficult. And I remember having conversations with you to where you'll tell me, man, like, this guy just don't do it like I do. You know
Right.
what I mean? So you're like, I don't even want to fuck with him because he don't really he don't do it the way that I do it and whatnot, you know. But I also think that can be a good thing too, to wear those many hats because you're never stuck.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like you can always keep moving if you know how to ABC 1, 2, 3 XYZ.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why I asked you earlier if wearing all those hats makes you better in the fields that you prefer to be in, because I don't like to edit. And I'll tell everyone right away, I hate this process. I want to write it, I want to create it, and then I want to hand the puzzle pieces off to someone else and let them turn it into the art that we release.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
And having to sit down and force myself to edit and at the end of the day fix all of my production screw ups, it ended up helping me on set because I already know, no, I can't fix this in post. We have to get it right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's an ongoing joke probably from the beginning of film with crew members is, it's okay, we'll fix it in post. Now, some things you cannot fix in post.
Yep.
And being in post and learning post has helped me avoid those errors in production.
Now, what part of editing do you not like? All of it?
I actually love the audio side of post-production. I enjoy that a lot. But the sitting down and compiling all the shots and putting them in the order, it's just, I've already done that. I was there. I got to see it. And now that I'm tying them all together, it's so boring for me. I struggle to focus on it and get it done. And so I'll sit down and spend hours on one shot because I didn't get it right. And now I've got to make it right. And at the end of the day, I've really done absolutely nothing. And so then tomorrow I'll do the same thing and it'll take forever to get through it. That's why I like to give it to someone else because I'm so tied to it. And if I don't like what I shot, then I'm not going to like how it ties to the next shot and just spend forever trying to fix it. And it doesn't ever work. Well, sometimes you just have to eventually get over it. But that's the hard part. That's the hard part. But it's helped me on set, you know. But I do love the ADR stuff, man. My first time doing ADR was right after I graduated, but I shot a film. One of the students who was a year behind me was on that project. Now,
what is ADR for the people that's watching that aren't in the business?
It's it's a automated dialogue replacement.
Uh-huh.
I think that's what it's called. And it's where you go in and re-record audio for something that you have filmed.
Okay.
Like in a movie, if you're outside and there's a lot of trains running in the background and you're shooting at a train station, you just can't. I mean, you could pay to shut the entire train station down,
Right.
but if you want trains moving in the background and you don't have the budget for CGI and fake all those trains, then they're going to produce a lot of noise. And
Right.
so you're going to record all that dialogue, but then you're going to have to figure out how to cut all the train sounds out. And that's tough.
Yeah.
So what they'll do is they'll just record it, and they'll hook up the mics. They'll do it all just like they would everywhere else, and they'll let all the noise in the background happen. And then they'll go to a recording studio, very much like what a musician would use, and put on screen the video, and then have them re-record the audio. And that is also tough.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to recreate that moment that you had on set. I have learned. In the moment, an actor will just shine, and it's beautiful, and the audio sucks. Not their performance, but your capturing of it is just terrible. And so you'll go back to a studio and you'll bring them in and say, okay, say this just like you did there.
Right.
That doesn't work. I mean, you find a way to make it kind of sort of work, but it doesn't work. A lot of times watching movies, I ruin a lot of people with movies because I notice things,
Right.
and I want to talk about it, and then they start to notice things. So like my wife is now able to determine when someone has ADR'd a movie, and it drives her crazy. She's like, she'll pause it and go, is this an ADR recording? And I'm like, I think so. Because you can just always tell. It's not natural. And some actors are really good at it. But the ones that aren't good at it, you can just see it. Once you figure it out, you can just see it every time. And it sucks. It sucks. But it's fun. It's actually fun to be in the studio and coaching them through to try to recapture that moment. And it's just you and them. And so before you had the cast, you had the crew, they were performing and doing their theatrical crap. And now that's just them standing in a booth with a microphone, and you're trying to, bring that star back. And, sometimes you can be in there for 10 minutes or 10 hours, but it's really interesting. It's a lot of fun.
I remember the first film that you sent me where you said, I did all the audio in post. Yeah. I was so impressed.
Oh, thanks.
You had I remember the footsteps and shit, how you could hear the footsteps and this, that, and another. I had never really heard sound from your films the way that it was conveyed in that film. And I was like, damn, like ice cubes hitting the glass and shit. I remember all that shit. Like, it was like, yo, Brandon stepped his game up tremendously with this, man.
Yeah, it's like I remember watching a behind the scenes disc on. I don't even remember the movie now. Anytime I would buy a disc, which it's very rare to even do that now, I had to buy that 2 disc because I would watch the second disc before I even cared to watch the first one. And I remember watching, it might have even been Lord of the Rings. I don't remember, but this guy was in. It looked like your studio on Carmack. Like he's just in the room, he's in the booth, and there's just crap everywhere. It did not look like your studio was clean.
Right.
This one had junk. It had like half car doors, tiny windows, like glass bottles that were broken. And he's watching the movie on a projection screen, and he's reenacting everything. And somebody's walking through the forest, and he's got like this thing where he's tapping that kind of makes it sound like a footprint, and it was like sword fights. When the swords would hit, he's in there and he's shing, shing, and it was awesome. And coming from working with you guys in Evolution and I'm not even like on the album, but I'm just sitting in there listening to you guys record and watching the process, to then seeing how people do this in films. And it was like, I can do this. And so my last house, once I got my own little studio in there, it was time to turn it up.
Yeah. And turn it up, you did. I think you stepped your game up 20 times when that happened.
Oh wow.
You
Yeah.
got so much better. And people that watch my stuff, they always compliment how well you put together the visuals, like your thought process on like, for example, you will shoot like when we did the Roots video. How you shot where Luke was getting in the truck on one side, and then once he got in the truck, you flip the angle from him getting in the truck on one side to the other side where he's closing the door. Like, people pay attention to that type of stuff. And a lot of times, in my opinion, that's what separates you from like the average videographer. You know what I mean? Is that your attention to detail is just crazy with that. And
Thank
I'll
you.
agree with you. Post-production is probably the hardest process in the creative process.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Because everything has to be right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll pick my brain, man, and my hair is turning gray and falling out simply because I don't know how to get that background vocal to blend with the lead vocal, to blend with the music in the background. And I'm sitting there for days and days and days and days and days, just trying to figure it out, you know. But it's also the most fun for me because it is the most challenging. I'm a creative guy anyway. You know what I mean? So going in, recording a song, writing a song, producing a song, I've been doing that part for so long to where it's like second nature
Hmm.
as far as that's concerned. But the post-production, I haven't been doing it as long as I've been on the microphone side of things. So it's challenging, and I don't always get it right. You know, so I have to kind of step away from it for a day or two, or 6 hours, or whatever the case may be, and figure out how can I make this work. So I understand what you're saying when you say how you don't like to edit, and editing is not your favorite part of it, because that part of it for me is the most challenging.
It's very challenging.
Yeah.
You know, I describe it as a puzzle without all the pieces. Like if you go out and you buy 1,000-piece puzzle and you end up with 995 pieces and the other 5 are not even the right pieces, how are you going to finish this puzzle? That's editing,
Right.
you know.
So
But
how do you normally do it?
that's kind of what made sound editing enjoyment, because there are no puzzle pieces for that. I have to make them.
Yeah.
And it brings that creative aspect to the post side, because when I'm just editing, and like we take the Roots video, we shot all the footage, we sat down, started going through it and cutting it up, and there's some scenes where the sun was overexposed, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it, and I'm trying to color match it, and I just can't get it to line up with any of the other shots, but we need something else to cut to. A lot of times when I'm editing and I come across this stuff, I can't just go back out and reshoot it.
Right.
You know, I can't just call Luke up and go, "Hey man, I'm 4 hours away. I'm coming right now. We got to reshoot this."
Right.
If he lived down the street, that'd be a different story.
Mhm.
And even then, with other non-music video productions, just scripts that I've written, it's hard to get everybody back together
Yep.
for this one shot. Everything works,
Mm-hmm.
but this one doesn't, and we kind of have to have it. And so you just spend all that time trying to figure out how to make it work. And sometimes the sound can cover it up.
Yeah.
Because if you can figure out a way to incorporate some noise, and you don't need that shot to last as long. Sometimes I've found that, at least for me, it takes my attention off of what's wrong with the shot, because there's something new that I have to hear. And by the time I'm back to paying attention to what's on the screen, I've already changed. So I used that with Luke's video for that shots or those shots that were overexposed. I started adding stuff in the background, and then I tried to cut away quickly. So by the time you realize what you're looking at, we're already on to the next shot.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
I try to hide that imperfection. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But you know, those are some of the tricks that I've tried to get away with post-production. Anyway, you know.
Yeah, I had that similar situation here recently with, I'm doing a project with my uncle right
Mhm.
now. And we used his children's choir from his church. My uncle's a pastor. And we used his children's choir as for background singers on this one particular record. Now, these children, their ages ranged anywhere from 4 years old to maybe 22, 23 year old kids. And the younger kids, they don't have any real vocal training. So some children are louder than others, some are off key and stuff like that. The guys, God bless them, the guys, man, it was almost like none of them sang on key. So I'm like, I get the record home, and the last thing I wanted to do was disappoint my uncle. You know what I mean? So I'm thinking, I sat with it for a couple of days, just listening and like, how in the world am I gonna fix this? Like, how am I gonna do it? So what I did was I got my daughter involved. She's 10 and she has the voice of a child. So where the imperfections were, I got her in and she sang where the children's choir, where they were lacking, she was able to fill in the gaps. You know what I mean? And fix things. The guys section, I got my neighbor. He's like a theater type of stage, Broadway type singer. You know what I mean? But he has a great voice. You know what I mean? So I got him and myself. We did the background vocals for the guys and just kind of filled in the gaps. You know what I mean? Fake it till you make it. Put up a whole bunch of reverb on it and and made it happen. Now, some of the children didn't make the cut.
Right.
As a result of it. You know what I mean? And I felt horrible about that, but I didn't know how to utilize all those voices and make it work. So, you just kind of improvise and figure it out until you make it work. Now, I would never tell those children I didn't use your vocals if they,
Well,
"Am
right.
I on it?" Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You didn't hear yourself? You
Right.
didn't hear yourself? I can hear you right now.
All right.
But I had to really dig deep
Right.
to make this record work, man. And it was challenging and almost to the point to where I just didn't want to make that phone call to my uncle. I just did not want to disappoint him. So
Mhm.
I was going through every scenario that I possibly could before I was like, look, man. And it was a lot of children. So like you said, getting people back together again to recreate whatever, that was not gonna, I know it had to have been at least 20 of them. You know what I mean? So
Jeez.
to get that many children back together to do this again, when after about 3 or 4 takes, they were already over it.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was like, yo, I can't do that. There's no way. There's no way. So we made it work. You know what I mean? We made it work. And I guess that's kind of like our job, as producers,
Mhm.
To figure out how to make it work. You use sound to cover or hide the imperfections in the visuals. I use my daughter to make that happen. So In the end, it all worked out.
Well, lucky for you though, your daughter is an Anderson.
Right.
That's just like a natural thing going on
Right.
there.
Right. Right. I'm just glad she wanted to do it. Because if she didn't, I'd have been like, had her, she'd have been like one of those other 20 children that I already had.
Right.
She wanted to do it. And it took us about a week to even just sit down in front of the equipment to even make it happen. And every day she was like, are we gonna do it today? Are we gonna do it today? Is today today? Is today today? So she stayed intrigued with it the whole time until she got behind that microphone, you know? So I appreciate her just the willingness to want to just stick it out with me to make it happen.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know.
Got
But we
another
figured it
EP
out,
coming.
Brandon. Nah. She wants to be a cop, so she says. So.
All right. All right.
So, I'm pushing her in that direction.
That's funny. Hell yeah. So what about like musicians that that have a song, have an album, whatever? Do you encourage them to go to a studio or to buy equipment and do it at home?
That's a good question.
Because when I was growing up, you know, we had eBay, but access to studio equipment, you know, they didn't sell Shure microphones at Best Buy.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now maybe they do, but now everything is available at your fingertips.
Yep.
And back in the day, it wasn't. Like, I remember walking into a Guitar Center and just seeing all the studio equipment, all the stuff you see in magazines and in music videos. Like, wow, this is where everybody buys this stuff?
Yep.
Now you can see it on your phone. And it's even cheaper now because it's so easily accessible. Everyone's making it. So you can spend $10 or $10,000. But at the same time, that's a brand new skill, you know, like Luke, shout out to LJ, who went out and bought his own studio and is now recording songs constantly. Like, what is your recommendation? Because you can go into a studio, it'll cost you, but you can go into a studio and hope that that person is going to help produce and turn this into something people want to listen to. Or you can stay at home and figure it out until it sounds good, which will also cost you because you got to buy equipment.
Right. Well, I'm going to always say, call me. Because that's how I feed my family.
That's
so
right.
Call me, you know what I mean? But in all seriousness, a lot of people don't have the patience to get equipment and record themselves, which is why they'll go and pay the money, or they don't have the confidence in themselves to learn, or they want this thing done in a timely fashion. And you and like you said, there's a curve to learning it. You know what I mean? It's not like you can just go out and buy a DAW, take it home, and you open it up, and you're gonna be like, aha, that's how it works. You know what I mean? You may take 6 months just trying to learn the rudiments of it all. You know, so if time is not on your side, but money is, I would say holler at someone like me to get your projects done. If time is on your side and money's not, I would say invest in a setup. Everybody should have, in my opinion, at least a small setup, if for no other reason, to get ideas down.
Sure.
You know, an audio interface, you can get one as cheap as $50. You know what I mean? Just to get ideas. And there's free software out there that you can get to get your project going, as far as that's concerned. You may not have the best setup, but if you can get your ideas down and then go to a studio and record it in a professional setting, that's one thing. But I think if you're a musician, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a dancer or whatever the case, you should have some tools associated with your field. Because we had the pandemic. We're going on, what, 3 years now? 2 years, 3 years since all that happened? Studios were shut down.
Right.
You know what I mean? So what did you do in that time? Did you just not make records? Did you stop writing? Did you keep writing? What did you do?
You know, I had a conversation with a buddy of mine who's we have the same music taste. When
Uh-huh.
albums come out, we just share them back and forth. And I remember texting him like a week into the pandemic, and I was like, dude, we are about to get so much good music
Right.
because I just thought all these bands, all these artists, all these singer songwriters, they've all got studios at home because all my musician friends have studios at
Mhm.
home.
Yep.
So I just thought that these big field league guys that they've all got studios at home. I was like, man, we're about to get so much music. These people can't go anywhere. They can't go talk to anyone. They can't perform to anyone. They're going to sit home. They're going to write and record. And that didn't happen.
Nope.
Albums were getting delayed. Like I remember One Republic released their or announced their Human album, the last one
Mhm.
that came out with a release date, and it was supposed to drop, I think, in 2019, and it didn't come out for another year plus. And I'm like, you guys don't have access to a studio to finish this shit?
Right.
What are you doing?
And part of the delays had to do with the distribution companies too,
Sure. of course.
because there were a lot of there were more bands putting out music in 2020 than probably the history of the music business.
It was
you know.
all just shelved until they got to it.
Well, it was more so like if you got 100 bands going to this one distributor and they're used to putting out maybe 30 bands a month. Now you got 100, somebody's going to get lost in the shuffle. You know what I
Sure.
mean? So and I remember I released a project during the pandemic, and I remember the distributor sending me an email saying, if you're going to put this record out, you need to have the master in submitted 6 weeks before your release date. Just
Whoa.
so we got enough time to make sure your record comes out when you want it to.
Hmm.
Because there was so many artists putting out music.
So it sounds like I thought that artists would just push it out the door, but it was all funneled through a channel that got backed up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because you had so many, and like you said, equipment is cheaper now. You know what I mean? When I first got started, we were recording on reel to reel, ADATs
Right.
and things of that nature. So a reel to reel machine can cost anywhere between a new one $5,000-$10,000. You just never know what the price is gonna be. Whereas now, like I said, audio interface, you can get them as cheap as $50.
Right.
And it's the same as a reel to reel machine. It's the same principle. You know what I mean? But it's so much cheaper. Everybody should have a setup. Like Luke. Luke has a setup, but he sends me the records to mix. You know what I mean? He'll cut the records at his house, and then I get it and do the post production on it and whatnot. Even if your skill set is not to, or your desire is to not be a sound engineer, mix engineer, a producer, or anything like that, at least have yourself a microphone, some headphones, you know what I mean? Something along those lines to where you can jot down your ideas,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that way you're not dependent on anyone else to make sure you have records, you know? It's just like you. You and I, you know, you're my video guy. I have a camera, but you're my video guy. You know what I mean? It doesn't take away the fact that I still need a camera. You know,
Right.
just because I have you, I still need a camera. You know what I mean? So you should have tools
Right.
anyway. Even if you are outsourcing things, you should still have tools. You know.
I like the idea of at least just for getting your ideas down. I remember watching. I guess this is when I was in high school, and I remember watching this. There was a DVD that came with Linkin Park's Meteora album,
Mm-hmm.
and I think this is the album. And they had they were in the studio, and they had a camera guy there who was recording, and they were like coming up with a song. And I remember thinking, like, I wonder how much it costs to just rent a studio for a day, because they're just in there coming up with the song right now.
Right.
And if you're not at home writing, and then like with Evolution, like if you guys went to a studio, if you didn't record it at home, y'all already did all the pre-production work at the house,
Mm-hmm.
and then you would show up, and that hourly rate would pretty much just be recording what's already done.
Yep.
But these guys are just sitting there next to the engineer playing the guitar. Yeah. I like that. Play it like that. He'd go, all right, cool. And then he'd walk in there and hook up and play it and come back out. I'm like, man, how much does that cost?
A ton.
Oh, I can imagine. I can
'Cause that's how
imagine.
I used to have to do it when I first got started. We would book 2 sessions a week. The band I was in at that time. We would book 2. We would do Tuesdays and Thursdays. The Tuesday sessions were for me and my man Q to go in and make beats. At that time, we were paying $25 an hour, and we would book 4 hours on Tuesdays. And all I would do was go in and make music on that day. You know, sometimes I could get 4 or 5 tracks made. Sometimes I could get 1 or 2, you know, just depending on the vibe and whatnot. But we would have a production day to where, because I didn't have any equipment at home, so I would have to go to the studio to make beats, and we would pay for just the time to make the beats. Then on Thursdays, we would go in and cut the records. Those were recording days.
Oh, wow.
And then again, we would pay, we would book 4 hours, and we would cut the records that on the tracks that I made 2 days prior. So it was costing us about $200 a week in the early 90s to cut these songs and whatnot. But that's how we used to do it. Now, when we in the first band, one of the band members had a workstation keyboard where you can make the beats on the actual keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
And he left it at my house. So I could make the beats at home, and then we would go in and just record off of the beats that were on the keyboard. Well, then he left the band on our second project. He was no longer a part of the band. And we were kids, so we weren't thinking maybe we should go out and get us a workstation. No. And all those $100 sessions, if we'd just saved our money, we could have had a workstation keyboard to where I could have still done it at home, but we weren't thinking like that. So we would set up and pay the money to go in and do that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's how we used to do it. Now, fortunately, you know, no one played any live instruments, so a lot of the instrumentation was just beat making on a synthesizer or a keyboard or a drum machine or something along those lines. But yeah, we would have to go in and be like, and we worked with a local studio here in town, and we would just tell the engineer, okay, we're gonna do this, and then we want this to come in here, and just like you said with One Republic, we were the same way, sitting next to him and like, yeah, we need this to turn this up, not this, that, this, that, this, that. But by the time that you know, the band that we're in started going to the studio, things had changed tremendously.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So, you know, those obstacles weren't in front of us. But there was a time to where I was one of those guys, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you got any closing words for recording today?
Again, if you're a musician, if you're a filmmaker, if you're a creative, I firmly believe you should have tools. You know, I don't know if anybody that builds houses don't have a hammer. You know what I mean? You should have tools, even if you're not gonna spend a fortune on, you know, tools. You should at least have bare bones minimum to jot down your ideas, and that'll save you a ton of money. And if you can get decent recordings at your house, you can just send the files off and have someone bring it to life. You know. But to those that have absolutely no interest in that side of production, the technical side, the engineering side, the production side, the producer side, if all you want to be is an artist, save your money. Save your money. Go in. Because I work with a lot of people that are like that, and that they don't care about. All they want to do is sing or rap or whatever it is they do. That's all they care about. You know, you can't even talk tech with them because they don't understand the lingo. And they may have been making records for years and years and years, but they have absolutely no interest in doing so. A guy like me, had I not been put in a position to where I needed to make a move, I may not have a studio to this day. You know, but it was like it was necessary for me to keep going because I was so far away from my hometown to where I didn't want to get complacent somewhere where I moved for an objective. You know what I mean? I didn't want to just live in New York. That's not why I was there. You know what I mean? I was there to make some moves. So I had to kind of, in my mind, I had to do something different. But, you know, you can save yourself a lot of money. It may cost you time to learn, but once you have that skill set, you can carry that on forever, and that skill set will in turn make you more money, and it makes you more valuable, you know, in the field too. So, you know, to each his own. But I still think everybody should at least have something to work with at home. What about you, boss?
I like that, man. You gotta have tools.
Mm-hmm.
Like whenever we started doing audio post-production, that came from just a necessity.
Yeah.
Because when we're out on the field recording, we've got our field audio, you know, kit. Like we're now set up where we can have multiple actors wirelessly recording audio, feeding it into one sound recorder, and all that is great. And the quality had jumped up tremendously. But at the end of the day, when I'm going through post-production and the cast is making so many noises interacting with their environment, and I don't have any of those files, I got to create them somehow. And I can't create them if I don't have the tools to create them. And, you know, I'm humbled that you noticed the difference in how my film sounded, you know, prior to a couple of years ago when I started adding those elements, because that took an initiative to go out and buy the tools that I needed to do it. And then the rehearsals of figuring out just by myself, sitting there with the door closed, how do I make this sound work? How do I make this sound work? It took a lot of time. Time is money. And
Yeah.
if you can't invest in the tools that you need, why even do it?
Yep.
You know, it might take you a week, it might take you a year, but at some point you've got to get the stuff that you need, you know. Well, man, I think that wraps up another episode of Peanut Butter Magic.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for checking us out. Till next time.
It's the Peanut Butter Magic Show. It's the